Imagine castles not as fairy tale palaces with glittering balls, but as cold stone traps. Imagine that within those walls, you were more likely to be undone by chill, stench, or hunger than by an enemy's sword. The banners do not flutter over romance. They hang damp with smoke and grease. The feasts you picture are rare, and mostly for one man. For everyone else, the castle is a machine that grinds the hours down to dust. One creak of timber, one drip of water, one sleepless shiver at a time. Now place yourself there. Not a knight, not a lady, a peasant brought inside for safety. Lucky, they say. Your bed is a sack of straw that scratches and whispers, alive with tiny, biting lives. Your breath shows in the air, your fingers numb even by the hearth. Smoke from the kitchen hugs the rafters and settles into your hair, your clothes, your lungs. The night is never truly dark, nor truly silent. Chains rasp, doors thud. A draft fingers the cracks and finds your bones. You learn quickly that comfort was a story someone else told. In here, warmth is rationed, and quiet is a rumor. Tonight, you will hear the truth of life inside these walls. Not polished, not romantic, but honest, textured, and close. We will walk the kitchens where fires cough and pots bruise the air with fat and ash. We will stand on the battlements where the wind is a blade, and in the barracks where snores jostle with prayers. We will visit the nursery where lullabies compete with rats, and the courtyard where mud never dries. You will smell what they smelled, feel what they felt, and notice how survival shaped every gesture. No gore, no spectacle, only the steady human weight of living in a fortress that protects and punishes in the same breath. Close your eyes and breathe softly, in and out. Let the hallway of your day recede behind you. Hear the wooden portcullis rise with a slow iron sigh. A torch gutters, tallow pools and trembles, footsteps on wet stone. The night wind steps forward like a careful cat. Stay very still. Let the castle gates open before you. Night guide, softly. When the gate settles behind you, the castle breathes around you. It is not the breath of gardens. It is damp, old, and close. Must lifts from the mortar like a low tide. Smoke from last night's fires hangs in the rafters, a gray scarf that never quite leaves. A bucket of water has gone stale somewhere. The scent is iron and pond sweet. Sweat is woven into wool and rope, a human salt that the walls have learned to keep. Listen, chains do not scream. They murmur in rusty whispers. A hinge complains, then yields. Boots meet wet stone. Clop, pause, clop. Weight and duty measured step by step. Farther off, a wooden door thuds, and the sound walks the corridor like a slow drum. Wind finds every gap. It does not howl. It hums, a patient thread through arrow slits and shutter joints. From the chapel, a handbell gives a single note that hangs and thins, like breath on a cold morning. The air touches you in small, definite ways. At the ankles first, where damp collects. At the wrists, where sleeves end and skin meets chill. Your soles know the floor even through worn shoes. The stone, slick in places, gritty in others, ridged where a mason's chisel once hesitated. When you pause, you feel the cold rise through your bones as if the castle were tasting you back. Cloth brushes your skin, coarse linen that never stops itching, a woolen cloak heavy as a small animal across your shoulders. You draw the cloak closer, and the itch settles into a background hum. Light is scarce and deliberate. A torch spits, then settles. Pitch softens into a steady glow. Candles tremble, each a tiny sun pooled in tallow. Shadows do most of the work. They lean from pillars, gather in corners, climb the twist of a stair. In the great hall, the light behaves like weather. Eddies, clears, then pools again, drawing the edge of a bench, the rim of a wooden bowl, the shoulder of a hound asleep by a low fire. The ceiling disappears into smoke like a night sky without stars. We step into the kitchen. The smell grows crowded. Singed bread, onion sweated until it turns sweet, a hint of fish, not quite fresh, fat loosening from a roast and bragging in the air. The hearth pops. Pots tap against hooks with small, regular knocks. A girl turns a spit, her forearms moving in a rhythm learned from hours, not songs. She coughs once, a soft bark, and the smoke folds around the sound and carries it away. Wood stacked by the door still holds the forest in it, the ghost of sap, the memory of bark and rain. Corridors narrow and widen like breath. In the lower passage, the scent changes to earth. Moss lives where the sun never visits. The walls bloom with tiny ferns that never quite unfurl. Water finds the ceiling, chooses a stone, and from that point, it drips, patient as counting. Somewhere below, a cistern keeps the castle's heartbeats. Plop, plop, plop. Regular as a lullaby taught by time. Your hand trails the wall, and moisture gathers on your fingertips. You taste mineral, a faint bitterness that feels clean. Outside on the rampart, the night lifts its face to yours. Wind carries hay from far fields and smoke from closer roofs. It threads your cloak and tugs. The stones underfoot release their stored coolness in a slow sigh. A watchman moves, and his mail whispers like rainfall. You look down into the courtyard. A cartwheel sunk into mud, a bucket on its side, straw scattered like gold that forgot how to shine. Somewhere a dog shakes and curls again. Back inside, the sleeping places wait. Not beds, not really, pallets of straw and woven rush. The straw keeps the day's odors as surely as it keeps your weight. Smoke, sweat, the soft sourness of many bodies. There are other lives in it too, small and busy. Do not worry. They have no business with your dreams. Lie down anyway. The straw crackles, then yields, accepting you because it has no choice. Your head finds a sack stuffed with husks. It is lumpy, but it remembers you after a minute and grows kinder. Look toward the candle. See how the flame learns your breathing. With each inhale, it thins. With each exhale, it rounds and steadies. Light drifts across the wall in slow tides, revealing a nail, a ripple in the plaster, a child's carved mark hardly bigger than a fingernail. Time does not hurry here. It gathers, the way smoke gathers overhead, the way dust confides in the floor. Even the cold is not cruel now. It is simply present, the way the moon is present, the way a roof is present. Temporal bridge. Let us cross it gently. You are not settling into a modern bed tonight. You are easing onto straw in a common chamber. Water ticks from the ceiling. The wind plays the shutters like an instrument it has known for years. Around you, people turn, sigh, and find their corners. A child whimpers and is hushed. The bell gives that single note again, smaller now, as if it has moved farther away. You are here, and you are safe enough, and the night will pass at the castle's slow pace. Breathe with the room. Hear how the fortress keeps its conversation. Wind with wood, water with stone, fire with ash, bodies with blankets. There is no urgency in this talk. Each sound has a place. Each scent has a memory. In and out. The air is cool. The straw is imperfect. This is how it was. Let the details hold you. The seam at your cuff, the knot in the timber above, the soft wheeze of a sleeping hound. Your eyes grow heavier in the company of these small, ordinary truths. The castle, for once, is willing to be quiet with you. Night guide, gently. Before the castle wakes, Martin is already working. He is 16, though numbers mean little to someone who counts in tasks and bells. The morning belongs to ash and water. He stirs the hearth's gray with an iron hook, coaxes a sullen ember into a shy flame, and feeds it with splinters no thicker than his thumb. His breath smokes in the kitchen gloom. When the first flare takes, he squints and smiles without showing teeth, as if light were skittish and might run if he welcomed it too brightly. He is the kitchen's least person, a scullion boy, a pair of hands, whose name is used mostly when he is in the way. The cook calls him lad, unless he errs, and then she remembers Martin, with a hardness that makes his shoulders lift. He rose from the village after a bad harvest, when men who had nothing to trade offered their children to the castle's work in exchange for winter bread. "You'll be warm there," the reeve had said, and Martin had believed it. Warmth, he learned, can be a rumor. The day is measured in errands. Water first. The bucket is bigger than it needs to be, because a smaller one would only mean more trips, and no one rewards efficiency that looks like idleness. He crosses the courtyard where mud remembers every foot that has pressed it, past the tethered sheep that blink like sleepy elders, and the thin dog that believes every hand might be kind. The well has a soft echo at its throat. He lowers the rope, hand over hand, the fibers leaving a small map on his palms, then hauls the bucket back up, slow and steady. If he spills, he carries the weight and the shame together. He knows where the stones are kinder to bare feet, which step of the stair keeps a shallow puddle after rain, which door will grudgingly open if he leans with his shoulder instead of his hand. He knows where the draft tests the kitchen like a thief, and where his breath turns white. He knows the sound of the cook's wooden spoon when it points, 3 taps on a table before it whirls and finds someone to strike. He knows the hour when the baker slides the first loaves from the oven, each round breathing a small cloud, and how far from the tray he must stand to drink the smell without risking a cuff. Breakfast for him is whatever clings to the sides of a pot. Porridge turned to paste, cabbage spines, a single grape rescued from a cluster plucked for someone more important. He eats quickly, not because he is in a hurry, but because it is unwise to give food time to vanish. The cook, Mistress Alice, is not cruel, only shaped by years of counting. She allocates food the way a priest allocates blessings, according to rank and need as defined by the ledger, not by the body. She doesn't see Martin's thin wrists when she weighs the flour. She sees the number of mouths that matter more than his. Martin's tasks repeat until they blur into one long ribbon of doing. He scales fish and smells of river for hours afterward. He plucks geese and leans into the mountain of feathers as if into a snowdrift that prickles and clings. He scrubs trenchers, stale bread thick as a slab, until the grease leaves and the crumbs remain. He turns the spit, which is to say, he becomes a hinge, and time becomes a circle around a fire. When his arms ache, he thinks of the forest beyond the fields, of tall beeches with smooth gray skins and a wind that belongs to no one. He does not imagine himself a knight. He imagines himself a tree, quiet and sure. In the stiller hours, when the cook counts salt and the steward counts wine, Martin escapes for moments, not far, not daring, but enough to remember he has a self. There is a narrow slit near the stairs that looks out to the east. He can slide 2 fingers into it and feel the world thread between them. At dawn, a line of light rides the fields, turning frost to a glittering pelt. He watches carters like small beetles move on the road, and once he saw a fox step out of the hedgerow and stand so still that the whole world seemed to balance on its narrow paws. He blinked, and the fox was gone. That is how freedom appears to him: brief, precise, and not for touching. He keeps a secret in his pocket, a sliver of wood stolen not from the storeroom, never, but from a broken bucket abandoned by the well. With a paring knife blunted from turnips, he has rounded the sliver into a bird. It is a strange bird, more suggestion than creature. Its wings no more than shallow curves, its beak a nick. But when his thumb rubs the wood smooth, he feels the shape settle, as if the bird knew it was inside the scrap and only needed patience to be found. At night, when the room breathes damp and the straw whispers, he holds the bird in his palm, and the wood takes the warmth of his skin and gives it back. Jealousy visits him like a draft, not a storm. Quiet, persistent, inescapable. He tries not to look up when the Lord's steward strides through the kitchen with his measured indifference. When young squires, bright with sleepless arrogance, demand meat sooner than the meat wishes to be ready. He tries not to think of the king, who lives somewhere beyond maps, with feasts that are not invented for the occasion, but expected as weather. He tries, but he is 16, and hunger is an honest tutor. Why does one man's appetite mean 5 boys' blistered hands? Why is fat trimmed and thrown to dogs, while the scullions search the pot's rim with crusts for anything that glistens? The answer is always the same. Because that is the order of things. Because the saints are busy with matters of the soul. Because the law is a wall with no door in it for a boy with no name. Because running would earn mark or rope. He has seen the steward's iron with its small, tidy letter, and he knows what a shoulder looks like after it has learned that letter forever. He has seen what wolves do to sheep, and what knights do to those who believe the forest is kind. He does not run. He works, and then he sleeps in the way tired boys do, as if sleep were a ditch at the side of the road, stumbled into without grace. Not everyone above him is unkind. There is old Peter on the gate, whose beard is a net for crumbs and stories. On cold days, Peter lets Martin warm his hands over a brazier of coals that glow like cherries. "You'll be a man of the world yet," Peter says, which to him means a man who knows the names of roads and the moods of weather. "There's a trick to stone," Peter tells him, tapping the wall with a knuckle. It remembers. Martin believes this. The castle is a memory made visible, of fear, of pride, of a winter that wanted to keep everything and was cheated. There is also Annis, a laundry girl with sleeves always wet to the elbow and laughter held like a pin between her teeth so it won't fall out at the wrong moment. She teases him for the soot on his face, wipes it away with a thumb when no one looks, and once tucked a plum into his hand as quickly as if it burned her. They share the plum under the stairs in 4 bites, each a sweetness that feels like a secret hymn. It is not love, not the kind minstrels sing. It is solidarity. The plum is the size of a coin and worth more, but kindness cannot carry barrels. The day remains heavy. It asks him to lift and lift again. It asks him to be nobody. When the Lord's table requires more meat than the herd can afford, the kitchen bones the cuts as close to clean as knives can come. Martin's fingers learn the language of sinew and gristle. He learns how to mark time by how onions change on the knife. sharp to tearful, then sweet to soft. He learns that the sound of a feast is not laughter, but the small, persistent bark of orders. More trenchers, more wine, more fire, more, more, more for them. For him, less. In the evening, the castle exhales, but the kitchen does not. The great fire sinks to a core of orange, and the stones around it turn warm as a sleeping bag. Martin stacks clean bowls until they sway, wipes a long table with a rag that never emerges from the bucket, truly clean. The smell of the hall after a meal is complicated. Meat and mint, smoke and wet wool. A yeast sweetness braided with a stale edge. He tries to hold in his head the moment when empty platters returned heavy still. Food untouched simply because someone better sent for something else. The cook watches. He does not dare touch a piece. Later, after the steward's count, the waste goes to the dogs, who gulp gratitude without shame. Martin loves the dogs, even while he envies them. He dreams of leaving, but his dreaming is practical. He does not picture himself with a lute or a sword. He imagines a small cart and sturdy shoes and a knife that holds an edge. He imagines following the road as it hums with travelers, tinkers with pots that chime like small bells, women with baskets of dyed wool, a man who sharpens shears and tells fortunes with a grin as quick as a fish. He imagines his hands learning a craft that gives him something to trade that is not his hours. He imagines, most of all, a bed that is his, not the castle's, his own corner under his own roof, even if the roof leaks like a sieve when it rains. Fear is the shape of his obedience. It is not constant. It lifts when he laughs with Annis, when the baker slips him a heel of bread, burnt on one side, and calls it a king's share with a wink, when old Peter lets him try on a mailed glove too big for his hand and says, "There, now you know the weight of other men." But fear returns whenever the steward turns and counts with his eyes, whenever the reeve from the village appears with a list of names and a face that looks like a ledger, whenever Martin sees, not far from the wall, the post where punishments are made into teaching. One winter day, a royal messenger arrives. Rider and horse both rhymed with frost. The banner he carries is small, but brighter than anything Martin has seen in months. The castle becomes a shaken hive. The cook's spoon speaks every language at once. Wood is dragged. Fires are coaxed into livid life. A pig that had been living on borrowed time discovers the debt is due. The Lord's table grows from 1 to 3. There will be a feast tonight because the king is not here, but his name is, and names have appetites. Martin's work doubles, then doubles again. He moves as if under a bell that is ringing only for him. The messenger eats first. Hot stew with the good cuts, bread still steaming, a wedge of cheese that smells of a cave where only sunbeams would dare to intrude. Martin stands close enough to feel the warmth of the bowl and far enough to become furniture. When the messenger is done, he wipes his mouth with a linen square Martin once lifted to his face, just to know the feel of clean. The square returns to the table and is gone. Linen is magic. In Martin's world, it appears and vanishes like a saint. Later, when the Lord and his company dine, Martin sees the extravagance of a world whose edges he serves but cannot enter. Eels braided into a pattern, their skins lacquered like river at dusk. A marchpane castle, a joke inside a castle, with tiny almond towers that melt if you breathe on them, piers poached until they glow like tame embers. Trenchers replaced before they are empty because the meat looks tired. Wine that shines like stained glass in the cup. He thinks of the forest. He thinks of Annis's hands, red from scrubbing, and of old Peter's coals the size of cherries. He thinks of the quiet bird in his pocket. Jealousy does not flare. It nods, as if to say, "This is why you are hungry." Near midnight, after the steward's count and the dog's feast, after the last squire has made a demand into the darkness and been answered because the kitchen always answers, Martin remains by the banked hearth. Mistress Alice, for once, is too tired to be stern. She rubs her eyes with the back of her wrist and says without looking at him, "Take something, lad." The world won't tilt. He reaches for a small roll that escaped notice and hides it, not because he must, but because hiding is how food tastes safe. Walking back to the scullery, he passes Annis asleep on a bench, her head against a basket of folded cloth. He leaves the roll near her hand. In the morning, she will think the cook softened, or a saint did, and Martin will like that story better than the truth. He climbs the stair to the top of the kitchen tower for air that has not been breathed a dozen times. The sky is a black cloth pricked with cold. From here, the world is mostly wind. He leans into it, lets it comb his hair with careful fingers. He knows where the villages huddle, though he cannot see them. He knows where the road bends and where the river is stubborn against ice. He stands until his face is numb. Then he descends with a warmth in his chest that feels like a small, banked fire of his own. On quieter days, when weather locks the world in place and the steward cannot invent errands faster than the snow erases them, Martin listens. The castle tells him things no one thinks to say. This nail is newer than that one. This beam once lived as a ship's mast and still hears the sea if you put your ear to it. This stair has counted more feet than any priest has counted sins, and yet it doesn't complain. It only sinks a little deeper into the years. He learns the voices of materials, the petulance of wet wood, the contented sigh of bread, the coppery lilt of a kettle when it is empty and wants to matter again. Sometimes he is trusted to carry a message from the kitchen to the chapel, from the stable to the gate. He walks with the careful speed of someone who knows the value of being forgotten. The chapel smells of beeswax and stone cooled by prayer. He likes the hush there, the way sound agrees to be small. He does not kneel. He stands and lets the quiet rinse him. "Make me a way," he thinks, though he doesn't say it out loud in case words oblige the saints to notice him, and he is not ready to be seen by anyone who writes in books. Once, a peddler comes. His pack is a theater, needles that ignore rust, ribbons that snag the eye, combs that promise to tame anything, small mirrors that capture a face and hold it hostage until you look away. The peddler sharpens knives on a wheel that sings. He lets Martin hold a knife after its lesson, and the blade cuts a thought in two just by being near it. "A good edge is a kind of freedom," the peddler says, and Martin presses the bird in his pocket hard enough to leave a dent. He trades a morning's work for a stub of charcoal and a promise that the peddler will return in spring. Promises are the coins of the poor. He pockets it anyway. The seasons turn, their hinges oiled with habit. In spring, the courtyard smells like something trying. In summer, the kitchen twitches with flies, a small annoyance that the cook swats into profanity. In autumn, the smoke has a depth to it, as if the year were being read aloud and the words were getting heavier. In winter, everything sharpens, including the difference between those who own warmth and those who borrow it. Martin learns that change is not rescue. It is rotation. The work is a wheel, and he walks it. And yet, Quietly, a thought hardens inside him. It grows the way ice grows on the inside of a window when the night does its careful work. First a fern, then a forest. The thought is not, I will run. The thought is, I will carry myself through. He begins to notice moments that obey him. When he turns to spit, he lets his breath set the rhythm. When he fetches water, he counts steps like a song whose last note always lands exactly at the door. He makes his bed with a neatness that gives the straw a pride it has no right to. He smooths the bird with his thumb until it gleams. And when Annis laughs about his pocket secret, he lets her. It's only wood, she says. Everything begins as only, he answers. And she tilts her head as if he has spoken a clever thing. He is not happy in any way a lord might recognize, but there are thin seams of contentment he mines without tools. The hound that comes to him and chooses his feet for a pillow while he peels onions. The way the sun, on one particular afternoon, finds his hands and turns the onion juice into silver. The first bite of bread, when it is still almost too hot, and he has to breathe over it as if it were a wound he wants to heal. The moment before sleep, when the room's sounds line up like geese and go quiet one after another. Cough, sigh, rustle, whisper, then only the clock of his own heart. At times, envy returns with claws. He hears a minstrel in the hall sing of a boy born in poverty who becomes a king because fate loves a good story. He knows he is not in that song. He knows he lives in the verse that is never sung. The verse of those who keep the fire, wash the trenchers, stand in the doorway while the music is happening elsewhere. He swallows down the hurt, lets it settle where hurt goes, and becomes another layer of endurance. He tells himself what old Peter told him. Stone remembers. One day, he thinks, someone will remember him. Not his name, perhaps, but his kind. The hands that made heat, that carried light in buckets. On the night when the frost draws ferns on the inside of the kitchen's only window, Martin wakes before the bell. The castle is so still he can hear the straw thinking. He slips out, careful of limbs and blankets, and crosses the yard where the stars have fallen into footprints. At the well, he lowers the bucket and hears the rope drum in the pulley's throat. The water is black and exact. He brings it up and sets it down and looks at his reflection shiver in it. He hardly knows his own face in the poor light, but his eyes meet his eyes, and he nods as if two Martins have reached an agreement. The agreement is simple. Keep going. He turns, and the eastern slit of sky is lifting. A single bird dares the cold and marks the morning with a line of music like chalk on slate. Martin listens. His wooden bird, warm from his pocket, presses his palm. He squeezes once, a quiet salute, then begins his day. The ash, the ember, the breath, the small flame. The castle will wake and ask again, and he will answer again. He is not free, not yet. But he knows the shape of himself now. He knows the weight he can carry, and the weight he will one day refuse. For tonight, because in a sleep story, the night is where truth is tender. Let this be enough. A boy, a fire, a pocket bird, and a promise he makes softly to the dark. Night guide, softly. Widen the circle now. Martin is one hand among many. In a castle, a day is a wheel, and every spoke is a person whose name rarely reaches the hall. We will walk that wheel through smoke and frost, prayer and ledger, and you will see how a place like this keeps moving, not by grandeur, but by ordinary bodies doing ordinary tasks until night forgets to count. First, the kitchen, the engine room of hunger and hope. Cooks do not so much stand at the fire as marry it. Mistress Alice reigns there, not with a crown, but with an apron that has learned 1,000 stains, each a date she never wrote down. She speaks by pointing, knife, spoon, finger, and the room understands. Her face is pinked by heat even in winter. Her hands remember burns the way a church remembers candles. Around her revolve other sons, a baker who rises before bread, a boy who chops onions until tears become simply part of the air, a woman named Rohice who can dice roots with her eyes half closed and never once catch her skin. The kitchen is loud with purposeful small sounds. The bellied cough of the hearth, the clack of knife on board, the wet applause of dough folding on itself, the impatient tap of ladle against rim. Fat has a voice here. It whispers, it pops, it pleads to be watched. Smoke is a resident, not a visitor. It settles in hair and cloth and lungs, and still, somehow, laughter finds a way through it. Thin at first, then real. Heat has its own etiquette. The closest 2 steps to the fire belong to those with rank in the room. Further out, the lesser warmth is shared by hands that do not decide. Even warmth is a currency. A scullion will edge forward during a lull and press blue fingers briefly to life, only to be sent back by a look because order must be seen to be believed. The kitchen learns to triage comfort. Nobles at a distance will be served hot plates. The cooks will accept blister and ash. The carriers will think of warmth as a rumor they can almost prove. Across the yard and up the stone spine of the curtain wall, cold writes its own laws. The watch keeps a schedule older than any man who serves it. Dawn watch, day watch, dusk, dog watch, dead of night. They turn like beads on a string. A guard named Arn, whose mustache collects frost like a hedge collects white, stamps his feet and turns his hands within his sleeves. Male at the neck sips heat from skin no matter how close he hunches. Beneath him, the world seems quiet, but the quiet has edges. A branch snaps where no branch should. A fox prints a sentence across new snow. A light wavers too long in a crofter's hut. Arn does not romanticize his duty. He endures it. He learned the trick from older men. How to count heartbeats between the bell's toll and the next. How to let cold become a fact rather than a battle. He knows the wind is not cruel, only thorough. It visits every seam in his clothing with the same diligent curiosity a steward spends on the storeroom. The watch has a compliment and a punishment hidden in it. The compliment, to be given the gate, the thing with hinges and outcomes. The punishment, the tower at night in hard weather, when even stars seem to look away. They swap locations the way chess pieces trade squares, by rule, by memory, by the quiet nod of the sergeant, who reads faces better than letters. They do not speak much. Words leak heat. Instead, they carve stories into the wood of the parapet with small knives. A fish, a bird, a sun with too many rays. The castle collects these drawings the way an old woman collects threads in her skirt, without comment, with patience. Between heat and cold, laundry makes a river that runs all year. Annis and the other women carry tubs to the stream or to the courtyard trough when the stream is a blade. Soap stings. Water that was kind in summer turns secretive in winter, hiding ice under a skin as thin as pride. They beat cloth against boards. They coax stains with a mix of ash and salt. They wring and wring and wring until knuckles bloom. Linen is status made washable. The Lord's tablecloths, light as promises, demand gentler hands and hotter water. The rougher cloth of servants can take more force. Annis jokes that linen is a small tyrant. The other women laugh and do not stop working. Talk keeps time when bells are busy. A new baby, a lost hen. A rumor of a fair 2 villages over, where a puppet man made a whole crowd cry, with something that wasn't even a saint's tale. They mend while they speak, their needles entering and leaving cloth like rain stitching a field. If a man passes too close and looks too long, the chatter cools into silence. It is a safety these women can still produce, to become stone in a place that respects stone. Not all obligations are woven or cooked. The castle has a privy, but that word hides the work. Someone hauls night from the pits and brings it to the midden, where time and straw and worms think together until filth becomes fertilizer. A boy with a twisted knee and a calm face does most of that hauling. His name is Christian. Martin knows it because no one else says it kindly. Christian moves at the castle's slowest pace and is therefore often counted last. He has made peace with the smell in a way others cannot. Everything returns, he told Martin once, shrugging, and then returns again. He stacks the waste with a mason's neatness, a geometry of humility that keeps sickness at a distance they can afford. There is a falconer, too, Lady Isabeau's man, whose birds live better than most boys. He speaks to them softly and cuts their meat into pieces honest as dice. Martin watches from the fence sometimes and learns a quiet awe, how a creature that could leave at any moment chooses to come back. Conditioning, the falconer might say, if he were a philosopher. Hunger, glove, habit. The glove looks like a small tower. The bird's eye is a coin that only ever shows heads. When the hawks lift, Martin's neck lifts with them. For a breath, the yard vanishes, the ledger vanishes, the old stew smell vanishes. Then the bird returns to the glove, because that is what it has been taught to do, and the yard returns with it. The forge lives by its own weather. The smith is a large man named Galion, whose laugh shakes nails in their jar. Sparks drift like short-lived stars. Iron learns red, then orange, then the idea of water in a hiss that always startles Martin, even though he loves the sound. The smith does not bow to anyone if he can help it. Metal gives him a spine no steward can purchase. Still, even he keeps accounts. Shoes for 5 horses, pins for the drawbridge chain, a hinge promised to the chapel and delayed by a lord's whim. The forge is a place where transformation is honest. The bar was this, it becomes that. A hand did it. A hammer named the change aloud. Stewards and clerks pinch time into lines. In a small room with a narrow window and a patient spider, the steward sits at a table where sand helps ink grow old. He knows the castle's heartbeat by numbers. Sacks of grain, head of pig, barrel of ale, bolts of cloth measured not by feel, but by ell. His quill scratches, a sound like mice with ambitions. He believes not in justice, but in balance. If he gives more here, he must take there. This belief lets him sleep. Clerks whisper dates into their own cupped hands, as if afraid the walls will mishear. A child runs past the doorway and receives a glare so precise it might as well be a seal pressed into wax. Order must be visible to be trusted. Fear is its lantern. Fear wears other faces. On the green by the outer wall, stocks squat like furniture for someone's shame. They are not often used. The reminder is enough. Inside the gate, there is a post with a ring. It has seen ropes and wrists and sometimes ankles. People keep their eyes from it the way they keep eyes from the sun, by pretending not to notice while shaping every step around it. The chaplain talks of sin and forgiveness. The steward talks of rules and fines. Between them, behavior is herded into neat pens. Punishment travels fastest by rumor. A boy who stole honey denied sweets for a summer. A woman who spoke out, made to scrub the hall where the Lord eats, her knees learning each flagstone by name. A poacher whose rabbits cost him more than supper. Stories make the ring heavier than iron. Women carry burdens the songs forget to sing. Some burdens are visible. The pails, the baskets, the sleeping child wrapped to a back while hands go on with their going on. Others are folded under silence, being told to smile at a guest whose look walks the length of them without permission, being summoned to mend late at night because a Lord's comfort finds its way into the thread of their own fatigue, being asked to clean rooms they do not recognize their existence except by the absence of dust. There is humiliation in being needed but not named. They trade consolation like smuggled goods, an extra fold of cloth against the cold, a shared apple, a hand squeezing a wrist as if to say, I see you. They carry each other, which is a kind of wealth no steward can inventory. Customs rule, even warmth. A girl and boy laugh too long by the bakehouse door. Tongues wag. An old woman shakes her head until the head feels wise. Wives are given by fathers with the same careful pride they reserve for a good goose at Michaelmas. The chaplain blesses. The steward notes. The women adapt. To refuse is to become a story told with pity and patience, like a cracked pot still used because it is insisted upon. Love is not impossible here, only unadvertised. It grows in corners, like mint that escaped the kitchen garden and found a life between stones. The Lord and his household float above this river of work, like boats that believe the current is their own strength. He decides a hunt. A dozen bodies move. Wood is cut. Dogs are fed. Boots are greased. Arrows are fletched. The cook prepares a pie that conceals tiny birds, which, when sliced, rise and make strangers clap. A visitor praises hospitality and writes a poem later about noble generosity. The poem will not mention the boy who turned the spit for 6 hours, or the girl who cleaned feathers from the buttery floor with her bare hands until her nails wore thin. Songs prefer a single bright point of light. Most of life is the glow that lets the point be seen. Children learn hierarchy the way they learn doors, by bumping into it. Little ones carry messages because they can fit into places a man cannot. A moppet named Tib is famous for running while holding a bowl without spilling, an art that makes her valuable. She is prized like a tool until a holiday when someone notices her laugh and gives her a ribbon, and for a week she tucks it into her cap as if it could keep rain off. The castle educates even without schools. You speak when spoken to. You keep your hands busy when eyes are on you. You become invisible when words sharpen. Sickness respects rank only insofar as rank buys warmth. When fever comes, it visits both loft and hall, but sheets and broths, and someone watching through the night tilt outcomes. A woman with herbs and a man with prayers share a bench by the bed of a child, while his mother wrings a cloth into usefulness. Leeches practice their slow arithmetic. Vinegar is argued with as if it could be persuaded. When the bell tolls for a soul, work pauses and does not. The seamstress turns her head and crosses herself. The strap she was making receives its next hole on time. Grief is given a corner to sit in. The day, gracious and unromantic, moves around it. Festivals arrive like bright caravans. At Candlemas, wax takes on a gentler importance. At Lent, the kitchen learns to make absence taste like intention. May brings ribbons and the tangle of young feet learning to be sure in front of everyone. The Lord smiles when smiling is a duty, and laughs when laughter has been cued. For those who work, festivals are lighter work, or the same work with different songs. And yet mirth happens, true and unchoreographed. A masked mummer tumbles, and a border of laughter stitches itself around the yard. An old tune catches the memory of those who thought they had none left. For an hour, rank loosens, not undone, but unbuttoned, and people remember they are bodies before they are roles. Around all of this, the church floats like a calm word spoken into a noisy room. The chapel is a pocket of stillness. Beeswax carries a softness even smoke cannot bully. The chaplain preaches about humility and charity and manages to mean both, even while he eats the good end of a loaf more often than not. He confesses those who come and prays for those who do not. And sometimes, in the late afternoon, he sits on the step and watches dust as if it were sacrament. The poor box is not empty, though it will never be full. Faith in the castle is less doctrine than habit. A candle lit, a head bowed, a pause before bread, because some things deserve punctuation. All of this happens inside a frame of law, so ordinary that it becomes weather. Oath binds man to lord, lord to greater lord, and so on until the king, who exists for most people as tidings, a coin with a face, a rumor with a date. Dues go up, protections come down. When the balance wobbles, the wheel squeals. Villagers owe days to the castle. The castle owes safety to the villagers. Taxes are a conversation held with a tone that does not allow responses. A reeve acts as mouth between two hungers, gesturing with a stick that has measured many men's patience. Resistance, when it appears, is quiet and braided into survival. A handful of grain set aside beneath a hearthstone, a fish taken at dusk when the law is looking the other way, a gap in a fence that is repaired in the morning after it is served at night. Within these rules, there are the small rebellions that keep a person from emptying out. A guard carves a toy for his child from scrap wood and smuggles his gentleness past the cold. A cook saves the browned bit at the bottom of a pan and shares it with the oldest scullion as if it were a shard of the sun. Annis tucks a sprig of rosemary into her sleeve to trick herself into smelling green while she works at gray. Old Peter tells a joke not because it is new, but because the familiar punchline makes the courtyard briefly belong to everyone. Even the steward, alone with his quill, allows himself an extra drop of wine and looks out the window long enough to see a pair of swallows write the letter for enough across the air. Social norms are not agreed upon. They are inherited, like a cloak, with stains you did not make and cannot wash out without losing the cloth. Obedience serves as grammar for the castle's language. Please and thank you are sparingly used spices. Yes, my lord, at once, as you wish, are the broth. The fear of punishment trims choices, but so does the fear of standing out as trouble. Dependence breeds politeness with stiff edges. When the steward's list shortens a ration, people say, of course, and then swallow hard with their mouths closed. When a younger woman is told to serve wine with downcast eyes, she learns to perform modesty as a glove performs hand. She is not less clever. She is more careful. And always there is the atmosphere of mechanism. A drawbridge rises. Someone turned a wheel. Trenchers appear. Someone kneaded before dawn. Armor shines. Someone's hands chapped to make it so. The castle is a body whose organs are visible if you look. Kitchen as stomach. Forge as heart. Well as veins. Chapel as breath. Storeroom as fat saved against winter. People move within it like blood cells, each important to the living of the thing, each unnamed by the mind, that benefits from their motion. Martin sees this without having a word for it. He feels it the way a fish feels current. Yet let this not be a dirge. In the interstices of duty, humanity insists. A hummed tune in the laundry that climbs a third on the last phrase, because that's how Mother sang it. A hand steadied on a stair, not because the next step is hard, but because two hearts find balance when one is borrowed. The taste of an apple kept past its season, wrinkled but bright where a knife frees it. A shared glance when the Lord's jest falls flat, and no one is allowed to not laugh. The glance says, "We are here together," which is a better joke. Kindness performs small miracles. It makes minutes lighter. It turns a day from a wall to a door slightly ajar. At night, the castle arranges all this into sleep. Cooks turn down the fires until coals glow like a constellation spilled too low. Guards lean their backs to stone and convince their legs they are awake. Women stretch hands that have learned the weight of wet linen and the weight of being patient at the same time. The steward caps his inkwell and lets the day balance itself in the dark. Martin curls around his pocket bird and knows the rhythm of the wheel, and somehow, knowing it lets him rest better than not knowing would. The machine breathes, the cogs dream, of heat without smoke, of cold without fear, of rooms where their names are said first and not last. And if you listen, truly listen, the castle confesses something to you as you drift. It is not cruel by desire, but by design. It was built to hold out against enemies and weather. It keeps out ease, too, by accident and tradition. Those inside learn to make ease of their own, in scraps and seams. The miracle is not the banquet you picture when you hear the word castle. The miracle is the quiet courage of those who sweep the hall after the banquet is over, humming, already thinking of tomorrow's bread. Breathe with them now, in, out, and let the wheel turn under your closed eyes. The night is long, but gentler when shared. Night guide, let us step back and look at the castle not as Martin's narrow corridor, not as Annis's wet linen, not as Arn's frost-rimed watch, but as an idea made stone. A sign you could see from fields away, saying power is here, and it intends to remain. Castles were built to be read at a distance. Their language was height and thickness, slit and tower, gate and ditch. They spoke to the world, stay out. They spoke to those within, stay in line. In every block of ashlar, in every stair that tightened clockwise to favor a right-handed defender, in every arrow slit that framed the outside world like a painting you were not meant to touch, the message repeated: order, obedience, continuity. The Lord's will was a wall you could not easily climb. Power like ceremony, and stone is ceremony's favorite instrument. A castle silhouette, curtain walls, keep, battlements, was a kind of crown set upon the land. Travelers measured distance by it. Farmers set hopes by it. Bells, hung from the chapel, marked time in a place where seasons did the rest. The castle housed not only bodies, but abstractions, law, oath, retaliation. Its moat held water. Its memory held debts. When you walked through the gate, you entered an architecture of hierarchy so complete that even the light participated, falling lavishly in Lord Solar, thinning to a meager wash where servants slept. Fear built these places. Not only fear of enemies across the field, but fear of hunger, fear of theft, fear of disorder that could enlarge itself into ruin. Stone answered with stubbornness. High walls against fire and ladder, deep wells against siege, stores of grain packed like slow days waiting to be eaten. small windows that exchanged beauty for safety. Within this planned caution, people shape themselves. Cultures do not grow like wildflowers. They grow like vines trained over trellis. The trellis here was danger, thrift, obligation. Courtesy learned to be alert. Patience learned to endure. From such conditions arose a character that was careful and persistent. Hospitality existed, yes, but it was rationed by leisure and watched by eyes that had seen hungry winters. Generosity glowed in pockets, in a plum shared on a stair, a crust slipped to a thin boy, rather than pouring like wine at every table. Even joy was practical. A festival also redistributed food. A dance also mapped alliances. A wedding also settled disputes. Songs remembered heroes because it was safer than remembering shortages. Tales shaped valor into a shield. If you sang about a knight holding a bridge, you didn't have to sing about the scullion who held a day together. The first made the world feel steady. The second made it feel honest. Most people preferred steadiness. Honesty could wait. The castle's economy extended in every direction like wheel spokes. Villages brought dues in grain, eggs, labor. The Lord provided protection, justice, roads that did not wash away when streams grew bold. At least, this was the promise. In practice, protection could be a quiet tax of the soul. You owed this place some of your life because it kept you from losing all of it. The storeroom was a barometer that measured not weather, but power. How full the barrels were, how strictly their bungs were watched, where the keys slept at night. Scarcity taught manners colder than any winter. Asking could be read as presumption. Enough was a holy word, and not often spoken. Architecture wrote behavior. Narrow passages shaped processions into lines. Great halls staged subordination as theater. You learned where to stand by where light fell. Tapestries didn't only warm walls. They softened echoes so high, voices would not carry secrets. Machicolations above the gate, those gaps from which stones and hot liquids could be poured, reminded everyone that kindness, even when practiced daily, lived beneath a ceiling of force. The drawbridge rose like a moral. Access is a favor, not a right. Children made games of these messages and grew into adults who no longer noticed the game. Much of what the world later called chivalry was, in such places, a costume worn on special days. Honor, yes, but also accounts. A tournament was spectacle. Behind it, carpenters mended rails that had been broken by lances. Cooks turned extra spits. Laundresses struggled with stains that came out of silk more readily than out of linen. Oaths were sworn and then restated in the steward's hand as dues once removed. The bright surface of knighthood required a shadow staff. Grooms, armorers, boys who learned the grammar of straps and buckles without learning their letters. The myth of romance, banquets, harps, a lady's glance, was a thin glaze laid over a bowl made of labor. If you pressed too hard on the glaze, the clay showed through. So the romantic Middle Ages, the one that prefers starlight and roses, exists, but mostly in the mouths of minstrels and the margins of illuminated pages where rabbits chase hunters and lions smile. The lived Middle Ages prefer onions and ash, muttered prayers, and a hand that knows how to lift a pail without letting the wrist go lame. There were moments of splendor, silks, spices, candlelight like 100 tame moons, but they were rented moods, paid for by weeks of carrying, piling, washing, mending. Even love had work to do. It put soup on when it could. It took a torn finger into its mouth to stop the blood, then went back to the washing board. What did this do to people's insides? It taught thrift as a virtue and suspicion as a weather sense. It cultivated endurance until endurance felt like identity. It prized community because solitude was scarce and dangerous. It bred a humor that was wry and practical. Jokes about the steward's quill, about the chaplain's belly, about the falcon that returns to the glove because wants are trained like any other creature. It raised children who understood that the world could be sharp and that gentleness had to be made, not found. It made saints of women who had no wish to be saints and kept them from calling themselves miracles because that would have been immodest and also because the pail was not going to carry itself. A castle collected stories the way a coastline collects driftwood. Sieges left scars in the stone and habits in the mind. After a siege, people ate differently, more slowly, more suspiciously, more aware of the mathematics of barrels. After a fire, people slept differently, boots closer to the bed, a cloak within reach. After a winter that took too many lambs, they prayed differently, no louder, but more often, their words less like poetry and more like counting. Each crisis tightened the trellis. Each relief loosened it a little, never entirely. And always, around the base of the walls, fields lay like an argument for patience. The castle depended on what grew beyond its shadow, even as it cast that shadow. Farmers read the weather with a literacy as deep as any monk's. They watched clouds take counsel over the hills. They watched crows rewrite the day on the air. They came into the castle with news of blight, of a cow calving, of a road washed out, and took away commands and obligations shaped to fit someone else's roof. The relationship was mutual and unequal. The castle fed on the village and frightened away the wolf. The village fed on the earth and fed the castle. A circle, and like many circles, both supportive and constricting, depending on where you stood. Let us ask the question then, the one that knocks softly but persistently. Was the castle a sanctuary or a cell? It depends on who is asking and when. To a woman running from raiders, the raised bridge and the bark of dogs and the thud of the gate were a benediction. To a boy like Martin, the same gate was a mouth that closed after swallowing him, and it digested his days into heat for other men's meals. To the Lord, the castle was a theater of authority and a savings account you could see from the horizon. To a mason whose hands set the stones, it was a season's wage and the pride of a line that would outlast his bones. To a besieged household, it was both safety and trap. Food measured out by spoon, water measured by the sound of the well. Nights measured by counting the enemy's campfires the way sailors count stars. Most places in most times are both things at once. The castle merely made the doubleness obvious. It gathered risk inside so it could be managed. It gathered people inside so they could be managed. When the drawbridge stayed down, trade and talk crossed it. When it rose, a different set of rules climbed with it. Ration, watch, hush. People adjusted because people do. They found corners inside broad rules and made lives there. They learned the passwords of the day, the looks that allowed, the gestures that refused, the phrases that soothed a superior and saved a subordinate. They balanced. Balance is not freedom, but it lets you stand. The myth of romance, viewed from this angle, becomes a lantern you can still use if you set it on a modest table. Knights did rescue sometimes. Ladies did intercede. Poetry did make a hard life bearable for an hour. Beauty had its small, stubborn victories. A tapestry warmed a wall and warmed a story too. Unicorns in a forest no one could tax. A carving on a misericord made a monk smile in a season when smiles were scarce. A song in a minor key threaded through a hall and tied strangers together for the length of a refrain. These were not lies, they were mercies. The error comes when mercy is mistaken for daily bread. Consider, too, how each stone signaled outward to other stones. Across the kingdom, keeps answered, keeps like distant cousins sharing a family nose. Border towers gnawed at hills. River forts watched the water as carefully as mothers watched fevers. The landscape became a beadwork of preparedness. Roads bent to pass under the gaze of battlements. Markets arose where garrisons needed meat, leather, tools. Crafts clustered, masons near quarries, smiths near fords, millers where streams agreed to turn a wheel. The castle was not a single building, but a system that taught people to expect boundaries and to measure possibilities by who held the keys. Keys. That simple image tells the truth. Safety, here, was always conditional. Who slept warm? The keyholder's friends. Who ate well? The keyholder's guests. Who found mercy? Those who had something to trade for it. Labor, information, beauty, obedience. Others found mercy too, but as an exception, that proved the rule. The moral weather trained people to anticipate permission. It made their bodies fluent in deferral. Shoulders stooped not from mere fatigue, but from the cultural memory of ducking. Voices softened at thresholds not only from courtesy, but from calibration. The sense that sound might push against a border and be pushed back. And yet, humans are better than systems at growing green things in cracks. They smuggled futures past protocols. A boy learned to whittle and made a bird that taught his thumb patience. A girl learned to read stitches and saw how patterns could record comfort across generations. A guard learned the night sky well enough that he could, just once, guide a traveler home in darkness without asking why that man had to move unseen. A steward, his quill resting, looked out at swallows and felt the ledger lift for a heartbeat. Such moments seeded a culture of quiet decency that no wall could completely command or contain. So, protection or prison? Say instead, instrument. In a dangerous world, the castle concentrated power and distributed fear, and in doing so, it gathered a community into being, imperfect, unequal, enduring. It taught the habit of staying, the craft of making do, the theology of enough. It also taught the etiquette of looking down and the grammar of being overlooked. From it emerged people capable of kindness in a language trimmed by necessity. People loyal not because loyalty was a poem, but because leaving could be death. If this sounds severe, let the music of their survival soften it. The same hands that lowered the portcullis also plaited a child's hair. The same stones that bore arms at noon carried warmth at night for those who leaned their backs against them and told stories. Night guide, lower your voice now. The keep stands, its silhouette black against the moon's pewter. The fields breathe. The road remembers feet, carts, hooves, and the weight of those who went because they must. Within the walls, 1,000 small fidelities turn the day into something livable. When we imagine the Middle Ages, let us keep both lamps lit. The lamp of romance, so the world is not only gray, and the lamp of labor, so the world is not only dream. Between them, faces appear, martins among them, lit enough to be seen and dignified enough to be let alone. Breathe. In this perspective, the castle is smaller than it seemed up close, and larger too. Smaller, because it is only one way among many that humans have tried to be safe. larger because it shaped the hearts that beat inside it. Protection and prison are two notes in a chord. What mattered was how people sang over them. Some sang obedience, some endurance, some resistance woven so fine it looked like duty. Stone remembers, yes, but so do hands. And the memory of hands is gentler. As you drift, imagine those hands laying the last log on the fire, smoothing the last wrinkle from a blanket, touching a latch quietly so no one wakes. The drawbridge is down in your breathing. The gate is open enough. The night is on your side. Night guide, softly now. The morning that begins, the siege, looks ordinary from the kitchen door. Frost etches the trough. The dog noses straw for a warmer piece of last night. Then the first horn comes, low, from the fields beyond the far hedgerow, and the ordinary folds itself away, like a cloth removed from a table. On the wall, Arn lifts his head. Old Peter is already on his feet, the coals at the gate licking air, as if they too have heard a change in the world's breath. By noon, the hills wear tents like a rash. Lines of canvas stipple the land, pale as mushrooms after rain. Engines, frames of black wood and sullen rope, grow out of the ground with the speed of bad news. Men move in slow purpose. A banner crawls up a pole and unfurls a color that means, do not think of sleeping soon. The chaplain rings the small bell. The steward shuts the ledger with a motion that snaps dust awake. Doors that are always open become doors that remember how to close. Order is a blanket pulled tight. Rations are counted to the syllable. The storeroom key leaves the steward's belt for the first time in months and finds his palm as if it had been waiting there. Barrels are sounded, sacks are pressed, candles are allotted by nights expected, not hopes preferred. Down in the kitchen, Mistress Alice speaks in measures. This much for the hall, this for the guard, this for the sick. She thins broths without apology and says, "We will taste comfort later." Martin tastes steam and calls it enough. The first stones come at dusk, a groan from the siege engine, then an incoming hum that turns air into string. The stone finds wall, and the wall remembers the impact with a grunt of dust. A flinch rolls the length of the battlements like wind through wheat. A second follows, closer, throwing grit into teeth. After that, the night divides itself into intervals you can name by sound. The far cough of the machine, the brief nothing, the arrival that makes the torches shiver. Sleep becomes a talent rather than a right. Those who have it are borrowed by others, their heads given space on shoulders, their breaths counted as if breaths could be shared. Food grows careful. Bread is darker, cut thinner. The trenchers, once thrown to dogs after feasts, live a second life as porridge thickener. Bones are boiled until they confess everything. The fat that rises is collected with reverence and whispered over like a spell. Martin learns to slice comfort into coins. He watches Mistress Alice skim and thinks this too is a kind of prayer. Rumor wraps itself in every cloak. Someone says the well is fouled. Someone says the enemy has friends inside the wall, a hand that knows which hinge squeaks least. Someone says the Lord will sally at dawn and break the siege like a rotten branch. No one says the last thing the loudest. The steward walks with a new silence, heavier, like a pitcher filled to the lip. He posts a boy at the storeroom door. He counts with his eyes as if people were barrels that might swell or leak. The watch hardens into habit. Arn's breath knots his mustache into pearls of ice. He names the lights in the enemy's camp to keep blood moving. That fire is a cook's. That glow is a smith's. Those small sparks are men cursing. The smith, Galien, lives now in a world of buckles and rivets that fail at the worst time. He hammers more prayer than metal. The chapel fills not with ceremony, but with the sound of people holding their mouths still, while their hands say what they cannot, crossing, touching, leaving, returning. The second week brings a new voice. Hunger speaking through children. Tib stops running bowls because bowls do not run to her. Annis works longer. Her hands look like maps drawn on bark. She steals an extra rinse for the Lord's linen, not out of care, but so she can warm her fingers an instant longer in water that remembers fire. She shares a crust with Martin without letting him see she has broken hers smaller first. The enemy's machines find a rhythm cruel in its predictability. Night grows startled. Day grows thin. A hole opens on the north wall and is answered by a temporary skin of timber that flexes with every new insult. Men fill baskets with rubble and hand them along in a line that pulses like a vein. Martin joins the line. Stone dust perspires from his hair. He thinks absurdly of flour. He blinks and sees Mistress Alice's hands in the dust and feels steadier. Then betrayal shows its face and tries to look like a mistake. One evening, when the sky is the color of old pewter and the bell for the small hours approaches, the postern door is found unbarred. It is a narrow door with a modest habit, used by messengers and mercy. But tonight it is a question. The sergeant swears he barred it. The steward says little and posts 2 men there who do not ask the door for company. Whose hand forgot? Whose hand remembered too well? The air grows crowded with guesses that have edges. That night Martin cannot keep to the kitchen. He ferries water to the men on the wall, the buckets barking his knuckles. Old Peter's eyes are fox bright. He grips Martin's sleeve with the strength of someone who has seen many sieges and knows the chapters. Watch the inside corners, he mutters, as if giving a recipe. Trouble nests where light is lazy. On the 3rd night after the door, a sack goes missing from the storeroom. Not flour, peas. The steward's jaw becomes a hinge that needs oil. He says a woman's name too quickly, Annis's, because women are used to being accused softly and punished thoroughly. Martin hears and feels the castle tilt the way a table tilts when a platter slides. He does not argue. He knows the weight of a boy's word against the steward's is lighter than smoke. He watches instead. It is quiet work, watching. He notices a squire, Hamo, too clean in hunger time, pass the storeroom twice with nothing in his hands, then once more with a cloak that hangs as if it were carrying something it didn't begin with. He follows at a distance, small enough to be mistaken for draught. The squire ducks into the chapel side door, does not cross himself. Martin waits until the door closes, then moves like someone who has learned to move where no one writes down he moved. Inside, the chapel smells of cold wax and breath. The squire's voice is low and urgent. Another answers, a guard with a new knife that still wears the forge's pride. Tonight, one says. At the postern, says the other. The bar lifts easier than it should. Martin backs away, and the floor finds his heel with a board that never learned to be quiet. A sound, small as a pin dropped, enters the conversation. Silence follows it like a cat. He runs, not loudly. He runs the way water runs under ice. Old Peter meets him with a question already answered in his face. The door? Martin nods. Words would only slow the hinge. What happens next is a careful act that looks like chance. The sergeant convenes no council. He moves 3 men like pieces a child might think random. One to the postern, one to the shadow near the buttery, one to the passage where the chapel and the wall speak. Arn, off his watch for the first time in hours, sits where he can become shadow if asked. Martin is given a task that is not a task. Carry a message to Mistress Alice. Tell her to hold back the stew as if the Lord were late. It keeps him in motion and out of a soldier's reach in case a sword mistakes him for a problem. The enemy chooses midnight. The postern lifts a finger, the width of a breath. A hand comes through with a knife held careless, the way a man holds a knife when he expects gratitude on both sides. The sergeant lets the door rise to a second finger and then lowers the bar, like an answer no one likes. The hand is caught, not in pain, yet, but in certainty. The squire, inside, makes a sound that has no age. Arn steps from the wall with the quiet of someone used to snow. It is over very quickly because most betrayals, when named aloud, are smaller than they felt in the mind. There is no spectacle. The squire is taken to a room with a lock. The guard who waited in the chapel stares at the floor as if a saint might rise through it and tell him what to think. The peas are found where the squire hid them, stuffed into a bench that had once heard love confessed by a girl who wore a blue ribbon. Annis's name falls out of suspicion and lands on the stones with a sound only Martin hears. He pockets it like a coin no one believes in and will spend later to buy back a little sleep. But the siege isn't moved by a single foiled door. The engines drum. The wall answers. On a gray morning that wobbles like a loose tooth, a stone finds the timber patch and the patch sighs open. For an instant, the world is a mouth. The men holding baskets step into the new edge as if into a line they have always stood in. Martin is among them because the kitchen sent him with bread, and because his feet did not turn around when sense suggested they should. He passes a basket, receives a basket, passes, receives. The rhythm steadies him. Then another stone, smaller, comes quick and sideways. It takes the edge from under a man 2 places down. The man's heel does not find anything. His arms windmill. The basket leaps. Stones become birds and then fall. Martin sees, too far to help with hands, close enough to be chosen by the moment. He drops his own basket, useless as an empty promise, and flattens himself, reaching with a length that surprises him. Fingers brush cloth, not skin. The man's eyes are new, as if morning had begun inside them. The wind from the hole is thin and glassy. Old Peter arrives like time. He plants himself behind Martin and gives him an anchor. The old man's belt, the old man's weight, the old man's yes. Martin reaches again, this time not for a wrist, but for the strap of the man's bag. Leather answers where skin slid. Between them, boy stretched, old man braced. They bring the man back to the line. No one cheers. There is no spare breath. The rescued man lies for a second, then crawls to the next basket as if nothing more happened than a cough. Later, alone on the stair, for a heartbeat, Martin laughs once, a sound that doesn't know whether it is relief or fear. He presses the wooden bird in his pocket hard enough to make it bite. Thin as wind in a crack, he tells himself, and in the saying, finds steadiness again. The moment has measured him, and not found him wanting. That is all. That is everything. Night does not end the siege. It only changes its color. Fires show the enemy's thought like lanterns under a sheet. In the kitchen, Mistress Alice serves bowls as if the act could move the wall back into place by patience alone. Annis brings Martin a cloth around his hand. he did not know he had scraped. "Fool," she says, with a softness that makes the word safe. The steward, eyes loosened by the night's close, nods to Martin once, a small omission of rank that feels like a gift. Breathe now. The danger is not gone. It rarely is in a story told true. But a gate has stayed shut. A name has been spared. A boy has leaned far over a new edge and come back with a man attached to his reach. The line holds. The castle keeps talking in its hard, necessary voice, stone to stone, hand to hand, and for this part of the night, that is enough. In and out. The drums outside tire. The engines need oil. Even fear must rest. The wind is still thin in the cracks, but you have learned to breathe with it. Night guide, softly. The siege loosens like a knot that has argued with itself too long. One morning, the horns outside do not lift. The engines stand with their arms at rest, like tired beasts that have remembered what grass feels like. By noon, the tents are being folded, the colors rolled. The ridge grows bare, where banners had tried to own the wind. No proclamation announces it. Absence speaks. Fewer shouts, fewer stones, a silence shaped like relief, but cautious at the edges. Inside, the gate stays closed a day longer than necessary, because habit is a careful teacher. When it finally rises, it groans as if waking from a bad dream. People do not pour out. They drift. First to the well, to prove the water is still itself. Then to the walls, to count the new scars. The timber patch is now a rough quilt of stone, stitched with lime and will. Dust lies in corners that were not corners 2 weeks ago. The chapel smells of cold wax and gratitude. The castle has held, but it is not the same shape anymore, and neither are the people. Mistress Alice moves slower, her voice lower. She has learned exactly how thin a broth can be and still be called supper, and she will never look at a bone again without hearing it speak a little. Arn, who once measured his watch by stars and habit, watches now with a patience that is kinder to boys who do not yet know which draft to block first. The steward's ledger returns to its old columns, but his hand pauses sometimes over a name as if the number beneath it could be forgiven a fraction. Annis still wrings water from cloth, but when the bucket is full, she lets Martin lift it. Not because she cannot, but because she remembers a night when hands were all you had and you learned to accept them. There is reckoning without spectacle. The squire Homo is sent away not to a gallows, but to a place where his name will not be trusted for a long time, which is a slower sentence. The guard with the new knife returns it to the smith and asks for an old one instead. In the yard, men replace the postern's bar with one that needs two to lift, not because wood has grown heavier, but because habits have. Rumor, that old traveler, moves on. Caution remains, like a guest who found a bed too comfortable. And Martin, what of the boy who leaned over the edge? He is not different in the way a minstrel would notice. He still wakes before dark to find ash and ember and ask them to become fire. He still smells of onions and smoke. He still keeps the small bird of wood in his pocket, its wings polished by worry and time. But something has been set straight inside him. He does not wait for permission to be a person. The castle is no longer the whole sky. It is a weather he can predict. He learns a new rhythm, work, then a sliver of his own. When the kitchen breathes between orders, he steps to the slit that faces east and lets the wind lay a clean line along his thoughts. When Mistress Alice measures flour, he measures breath, 4 counts in, 6 out. Quiet arithmetic that reminds him his body also keeps books, He begins to carve a second bird from a bit of fallen beam. This one has clearer wings. He gives the first to Tib, who runs bowls again, and now runs a hand over the wood as if patting a dog. "It's to remind you to keep flying," he says, and she rolls her eyes because she is too busy to be solemn. But she tucks the bird into her apron and does not lose it. Freedom shifts shape for him, for it is not a road unfurling to a horizon he cannot afford. It is the way his mind can step out through the arrow slit and walk the fields, then return with news the kitchen never hears. How the barley shivers, how the river rehearses its song for spring. It is choosing small excellences in a place that rarely notices them. A floor scrubbed so well that the next set of feet starts cleaner. A loaf lifted at just the right moment so the crust sings. A word held when anger would have spent it foolishly. It is saying no to the quiet cruelty of envy, and yes to the stubborn craft of being kind. He is not naive now. The king will feast again, somewhere else, because names eat in many halls. The steward will tighten rations when winter leans in. Men with banners will argue with fields until fields answer with mud. The ring by the gate will not vanish. But Martin's heart has practiced staying wide while the world narrows. He has learned that fear has a tempo, and that breath can find a slower one and keep it, lamp-like, in the chest. On an evening when the repaired wall still smells of wet stone and the sky has the color of clean wool, Martin climbs to the top of the kitchen tower. Old Peter sits there, legs out, as if keeping company with the view. They do not talk at first. Below them, life resumes its necessary chores with the gentle clatter of plates and the confidence of dogs who have remembered that tomorrow usually comes. "Still thinking of running?" Peter asks without looking, the way you ask a question that is more weather report than test. "Yes," Martin says. It surprises him to hear the word sound calm. "But not with my feet. Not yet." Peter snorts, approving. "Best kind of practice. Feet follow, if you feed them roads." They sit until the first star announces itself. Martin lifts the second bird, rough still, and holds it to the last light. He thinks of Annis's hands, of Arn's steady nod, of Mistress Alice's spoon tapping rim to call a room to order, of Tib's ribbon stubbornly bright in a world that prefers brown. He understands that freedom can be a flock, made of many small, ordinary wings. Night gathers kindly. The siege is a story now, and stories, like wounds, close from the edges in. The castle rests in its new shape. Those within it rest in theirs. Martin rises, pockets the bird, and goes down the stair to bank the fire for sleep. He walks lighter, not because the work has changed, but because he has. The walls remain. The key is still a key. The world will ask again in the morning. He is ready to answer as someone who belongs to himself first and then to the day. Night guide, gently. Let us lean back from the wall until stone blurs into shape and shape into meaning. Castles, for all their bravado, were only shells. Careful armors built around fear and power. They rose because the world was sharp and uncertain, because winter had teeth and men had banners. But inside those shells, people warmed each other. They made soups from bones, light from beeswax, songs from breath. They stitched courage into ordinary hours. Stone did not love them. Stone did not hate them. Stone simply held the weather back while they found ways to be human. Listen to that quietly. Systems are hard, people are soft, and still, it is the softness that keeps the fire. The keep announced authority. The kitchen practiced mercy. The gate measured who might enter. The laundry measured who might be clean. The tower promised punishment. A shared plum promised sweetness anyway. Castles were not villains, only instruments. The tune they played could be harsh. And yet, under that music, fingers learned gentler melodies, small patterns of care, small rituals of fairness, small, stubborn choices to remain kind. Breathe in and out. Think of Martin's hands, raw and sure. Think of Annis wringing water and laughter from the same day. Think of old Peter's coals, round and cherry bright, teaching patience. The lesson is simpler than the walls wanted it to be. Strength is not the height of a parapet. It is the steadiness of a heart. Control is not a drawbridge. It is a breath taken when fear arrives, then another, slower one, and another still. The fortress holds, or falls. The person learns to stay gentle inside either outcome. Now come closer to your own century. Our castles wear different faces. Offices with glass battlements and calendar bells. Inboxes like arrow slits that send you tasks as fast as arrows flew. Routines that raise and lower drawbridges at set hours. The pressures are clean and bright and constant. Timelines, deadlines, lifelines braided together until you can't tell which is which. Some days, you move through corridors of expectation, and everyone's voice speaks in your own head. Some days, the ring by the gate is a metric. The steward's ledger is an app. The chaplain's advice comes as a list. Old forces, new names. And still, the human answers have not changed. Warmth is made, not issued. Rest is practiced, not granted. You feed yourself soup, not only with spoon and bowl, but with pauses, with short walks under an ordinary sky, with music that reminds your ribs they are instruments. You share plums, a kind word, a saved seat, 5 quiet minutes given to someone who needed them more than you did. You notice who is cold and shift the common fire an inch closer. You replace earn your worth with remember your worth, as if setting a stone back into place where a wall had thinned. If you listen, you will hear the same small rebellions. A colleague refilling another's cup without keeping score. A parent choosing softness over hurry. A stranger holding a door and not expecting thanks. You, right now, choosing to rest in a world that applauds motion. These are not grand gestures. They are the lintels and beams of an inner keep. Quiet architecture that lets you shelter others without turning them away. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let the tempo drop like a drawbridge in reverse, lowering not to admit an army, but to admit ease. In your chest, a hearth is learning you again. Your shoulders are parapets that can relax. The sentries of your jaw can go off duty. Notice the places that were braced against siege. The brow, the throat, the belly. Place a hand there, or imagine doing so. Warmth goes where it is invited. Invite it gently. Think of the contrast we've held tonight. The myth and the day. Stories painted castles with gold. Life painted them with smoke. Our age does something similar with success. Banners, victories, the staged sunlight of achievement. But the real thing is quieter. It looks like dishes washed without resentment, like an email written with grace, though no one will quote it, like a walk in evening air where you say nothing profound and mean it. You are not wrong to want beauty. Only remember where it grows, in corners, between tasks, in breaths, spaced the way steps are spaced when you are not racing. Was the castle protection or prison? Yes, and yes, so are our routines. Protection when they shape safety. Prison when they shrink possibility. The work is to know when to lean on the wall and when to lean away, to keep a gate that opens as often as it closes, to say no where your days are being spent without your consent, to say yes where gentleness asks to enter. No trumpets will celebrate these decisions. That is not their nature. They feel small, but small is where living fits. Let the past continue its soft labor on you. Let Martin's patience reduce the broth of your worry. Let Annis's humor bleach the harshness from a day's stains. Let Arn's reliable watch convince some inner guard to set a calmer rotation. Let old Peter's simple wisdom settle. Stone remembers, but so do hands. What will your hands remember from today that is worth repeating? What might they forget on purpose? You don't need to answer. The body understands more than the mind can say. Trust it to file what serves and to release what doesn't. In and out. The room you're in is not a great hall, and that is a mercy. Its walls do not demand performance. Its door does not rank the people who pass through it. The lamp beside you is a loyal moon. The fabric against your cheek is not coarse linen hoarded by a ledger. It is yours, and it is kind. The air does not smell of tallow and panic. It smells faintly of your own life. You are safe enough to lower the portcullis of your eyelids and let the world wait. Outside, tonight is busy with its usual patient work. Somewhere, far away, a river rehearses spring. Somewhere, close, a branch writes on the window a message that says only, "I am here." You do not have to understand every era, every system, every rule. You have to understand the small kingdom of your breath. When fear knocks, offer it tea and a short chair. When pride shouts from the battlements, wave once and go back to the hearth. When weariness sits down heavily beside you, hand it a blanket and say, "We are resting now." You do not need permission. As the past fades toward sleep, carry forward its gentlest technology, the slow ritual that renders hardness edible. Warmth shared, time widened, attention offered, then softened, then released. In your mind, lay another log on the familiar fire. In your chest, bank coals for the night, bright enough to glow if looked at, dim enough to be left alone. Let the drawbridge lower across whatever worry still circles your moat. Watch it cross. Watch it go. Watch the water resume its quiet, patient shape, poetic now and simpler. In stone, only shadows remain. The banners have been taken down. The engines are mended into farm tools. The storytellers have gone home. The keep is a dark silhouette against a moon that does not care about rank. Somewhere within, a boy's carved bird outlasts a winter. Somewhere without, a field remembers footsteps and forgives them. You are not in that castle. You are here, and your room has made a promise to you. It will keep your sleep the way a good wall keeps the wind. Let the last lights drift to embers. Let your thoughts pad away, like tired dogs finding their places. Let names put down their armor and become only names again, harmless and light. Your breath is a gate opening and closing with perfect timing. Your body is a familiar country. You have traveled through fear and power and found, as people always do, warmth and hope waiting in the kitchen of the heart. Close your eyes. The night is on your side. In stone, only shadows remain. In you, a quiet fire. Drift now, gently, safely, into the soft country beyond words. Night guide, very softly now. Let the simplest images return and settle. A low hearth, steady and tame. A quiet night, kind and unhurried. Warm breath, smooth as silk on the inside of your chest. In and out, calm. In, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, no hurry. In and out calm. See the fire as embers, round and patient, holding their gentle orange like small moons. They do not reach for you. They keep you company. A faint crackle, a soft glow across the floor, shadows folding themselves neatly into corners. Listen to the night, not silent, friendly. The kind of quiet that makes room. A branch strokes the window, and the window approves. Far away, a late bird changes perch and decides that is enough adventure. Close by, fabric lifts and settles with every breath you take. In and out, calm. Let the breath be the drawbridge, lowering, lowering, until it rests. Your body knows what to do. The back learns the bed. The jaw learns the words soft. The shoulders remember down and away. Hands loosen, fingers uncurl, palms warm. The belly, yes, let the belly lead the way, releasing like a tide at evening. Nothing to hold, nothing to carry. In and out, calm. If a thought arrives, let it sit by the hearth. It can watch the embers with you. It doesn't need answers. It will grow drowsy and wander off on its own. Feel the room as a friendly keep. No banners, no watch. Only a lamp that understands you. A blanket that keeps its promises. A pillow that remembers your name without speaking. You are inside the safest circle now. Your breath, your warmth, your weight supported. In, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Quieter, slower, calm. If you like, place a hand where breath rises. Follow it with the part of your mind that's still awake. Notice how the hand is warm. Notice how the breath arrives on time, every time, like a loyal friend who never knocks. The body breathes. The mind nods. The heart dims its lantern just enough. Let what is old stay old. Let the day unlace itself and fall to the floor. Let names remove their armor and hang it on a peg by the door. There will be more morning than you need. Tonight belongs to ease. In and out, calm. A little slower now. In, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. May the room grow warmer by a thought. May the bed grow softer by an inch. May the dark grow kinder by a shade. And here is your blessing for the road between waking and sleep. May the stones of old castles stay in the past, and may a soft, bright sleep come to you. May your breath be smooth and steady. May your dreams be light and generous. May your body be thanked for its faithful work and allowed to rest. In and out, calm. The embers dim to stars. The night leans closer, not to ask, only to keep watch. You are safe. You are warm. You are drifting. In and out. Good night.